Scale Customer Success Summit. You are currently watching the Supporting and Growing All Accounts session. I'm excited to introduce our speakers, and as I introduce them, I'm going to have them answer our icebreaker question. What would you like to scale in your personal life? So first up, we have Danny Villarreal, VP of Customer Success at Twilio.
Hey, great to be here. And what I would like to scale in my personal life would be all of the home improvement projects that seem to never end.
Next up, we have Erica Akroyd, Senior Manager of Customer Education at Pendo.io.
Hey everyone, I have 2 young kids at home, so I would love to find more efficient ways to manage the low value responsibilities that I have, because it seems like there's just not enough hours in the day.
Absolutely. Next up, we have Mary Poppin, President and CCO at Horizons EX.
Hey everybody, great to be here today. I would love to scale for those of you that may have older children or are planning trips for your whole family. I would love to scale that, coordinating schedules, booking airfare, and finding restaurants for everybody. It's not easy.
Absolutely. And next up, we have our moderator, David Leibel, Manager of Account Management at Matic. David, you're muted. Oh no, I think we're having some technical difficulties there for David. Just a second for folks. He's gonna get his headset fixed. And while he's doing that, before he answers this question, but before we start the session, I just want to remind everyone to please add any questions you have to the chat. Any questions we don't get to, we'll share with our speakers after the session, and we'll post the answers alongside the session recording when the Resource Hub goes live. And please just give us a little bit of patience while David tries to fix his mic. David, are you with us? You are not with us just yet.
And we just heard him like 2 minutes ago.
I know, we are just in our pre-session before this in the call, and it is definitely was working beforehand just up to this point. And so actually, while David is still figuring that out, I think we have one of our last MCs joining as well.
Can you guys hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
We can hear you now. David, welcome.
Thank you. Sorry about that, everybody. I'm glad to be here. I was here the whole time. Glad you can hear me. That's embarrassing. But what I would like to scale in my personal life is yard work. That's my personal one. I come from New York, now living in Atlanta. First time I'm having a real lawn that I need to take care of, and I have no idea when to apply all the things throughout the year. So automated triggers that would allow me to do that would be incredible to scale my yard work.
That's a really good one, David. I agree. I don't have that much lawn, but I definitely would love to be able to scale and automate that. So I will be heading off stage here and letting David take over. And just as a quick reminder, please share your questions in chat. And if we don't get to them, we'll make sure to share the answers with the follow-up of the recording and session. Thanks, everyone.
Awesome. Well, I am the moderator, so I will lead us off today. And today we're going to be talking about when and how we're going to scale customer success. So the first question I think that makes sense to start off with is, when is the right time to start thinking about a one-to-many strategy at an organization? I know we all take different approaches on how we go about this. And so when do you all feel like is the right time to really kickstart the process? I know, Mary, leading up to this event, we thought about it different ways, and you had some really great ideas. So I'll kick it off to you to get us started.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a great question. It's like the $1 million question, the when. For me, the short answer is as soon as possible. So the earlier you can create content and resources that can be shared, with many customers across multiple channels, the faster you're going to be able to scale efficiently and grow while, your business takes off. but anytime is a good time really to get started. So I would say after this session, go ahead and just start to, dive in. But the key ultimately is to define what are the most common deliverables across the customer journey, and then prioritize which can be addressed in a one-to-many approach, starting really with the easiest to the most difficult by looking at the channels, the resources, the time to implement, and the cost. And that will help you prioritize. Plus, many of us have our friends in marketing who have done a really good job, most likely already looking at a one-to-many solution to their communications and outreach, for example. And that's something you might be able to piggyback on, leveraging their technology, but sending out your customer communications in a more scaled manner. And one of the things that will help you do as well is to target the right audience with the right communication at the right time, so you can actually personalize at scale as well. And then one other thought I had is when you're rolling out something new in a one-to-many approach, it's a really good idea to think of piloting it with a small group first, kind of work out the kinks. So if you're going to do an implementation in a cohort fashion and take customers through as a group, maybe give that a try, work out, some of the resources and some of the delivery, and then you can apply it more broadly.
I love that. It's never too early to start. And you touched upon different ways that we could approach it, which I really appreciate. Danny, I know leading up to the event as well, you had some ideas about how and when to start this thing off. So what's your take on it? Is it ever too early or too late to start scaling CS? When is the right time?
No, I don't think it's ever too early to start. And I think you have to really take an incremental approach to it. I think scale sounds easy to a lot of people, and you can read books and go to webinars like this, and it just seems like something you can implement very quickly or simply. I think a lot of people will underestimate how long it will actually take to get a scale program in place, and then the level of effort to maintain that over time. It does sound great, like having scaled implementations or having scaled customer success or having scaled support, but all of that requires the necessary materials, the communication profiles, like everything that you're going to do to take it from that one-to-one to that one-to-many approach. And so I think the first thing, and I totally agree with Mary, is you have to take an experimental approach to this. I've rolled out scale 2 to 3 times already in different sizes of companies with different kinds of users behind it. And one of the things I've learned is not everything works every time. So you have to be willing to fail a little bit. You have to try and iterate on things as you're rolling them out. But I think that the most important thing is to try to scale some of the things that are going to bring the most value to the most people at once. It's often, you go after some of the things that are maybe the most painful, but you really need to be putting the customer's value first and thinking, for example, how can I do a training that one customer found really helpful? How do I do that with a larger group or with a subset that's maybe using a particular module or something along those lines? And so that's something I've been really successful with is starting with the things that have the highest customer value and then working backwards towards maybe some of the things that might be more internally painful. You're going to get some momentum with that. And I think getting those quick wins early is really important to getting this off on the right foot.
I love it. And the two themes here that I'm hearing from both you and Mary is this cohort concept, really, making sure that not only are we experimental with smaller cohorts, but really transitioning to a group-wide approach, especially with like implementations and things. So like that's the first step towards scale. Next up, I know Chad, welcome to the party. Happy to have you here. Leading up to this, you had some ideas on that as well. So what's your take? When should we introduce scaled CS? And then after that, we'll go over to Erica for her thoughts to wrap it up.
Yeah, I think just on some of the things that Mary had said, I think as a customer success leader, you have to put your business hat on. And so one of the things you want to think about is, what's your ACV? So what's the annual average contract value? If it's lower, like let's say it's in the 15 to 20,000 range, you're going to be forced to do something around scale because the economics don't make sense. Like you can't just have like dedicated CSMs and implementation, everything like that. So I think that's one of the things is that you should be thinking about the unit economics of your business and how you manage that and getting through and thinking through that early. Now, on the other side, not to counter the experimentation, because you definitely want to experiment, but I'd also say like start off by doing things that don't scale. So a lot of times we want to rush into scale, want to throw something out there, and you need to do some different testing, but also look for those things that don't scale and, really get them in a good place, and then think about, scaling that. So just be mindful, like don't try and scale everything, at once because someone's saying like, hey, like we need to scale. But, think about something like, for example, maybe a customer is struggling using a certain part of your product and your CSMs, and you've maybe either time tracked your CSMs or ask them to fill out an exercise on where they're spending their time. And that that like, hey, you're spending way too much time going through this particular area of your product. Let's set up maybe a workshop where we can actually, bring customers to, or bring them to like discuss that particular topic, because that you've perfected it, but there's no reason why you should be doing like one-off like sessions with customers. And I think the last thing is that there's this fear, like, oh, we're gonna have a degradation of experience if we do, these more scaled experiences. And I think you just have to get over that fear. And that's where it kind of goes in the experimentation. But I think that's one of the things, like, oh, we can't do that. That's just going to be bad for our customers. And again, like going back to the unit economics and thinking about what your customers need. I mean, really, that should be guiding you. What do your customers want? And how can you kind of come to that compromise or that optimal approach? And that's kind of a way to look at things.
For sure. And that actually leads us up to the next question. I know, Erica, this is something that's really top of mind for you right now. And so I just want to hear about this. So I think that when we talk about scale and customer experience, the first thing that comes to mind in terms of communication, or as a channel at least, is email, right? Create these triggers in order to communicate via email. But like, is email the right channel? Is it the only channel? Or should we be thinking about different channels? Like, how should we think about scale and communication without degrading the customer experience and focusing specifically on communication? So Erica, I know you have some thoughts on this. What are your thoughts? Is email the right and only channel? And if not, what are you seeing that works?
Yeah, well, the short answer is no. Email is definitely not the only channel. So I think that teams really need to tap into more interactive ways to connect with their customers. Of course, I have to mention, in-product messaging is a great way to grab a user's attention right there in the product, making it really relevant and impactful. And so not all customers, though, resonate with that type of engagement. You have a lot of different learning styles across your user base. And like what Danny said earlier, you can't boil the ocean. You can't solve for all the nuances. So you have to really solve for the 80% of your customer base. So you have to try different ways to reach your audience and accommodate those different styles and preferences. So, outside of the digital world, like email, in-product messaging, we've set up peer-led forums, our most popular being our Slack workspace, where users go and swap tips and tricks. They share their experiences. We have local user groups for people to connect with each other and get more of that human element. And these are just great for bringing people together who share common interests, because a sense of community is a great way to learn and to collaborate and to engage not only with other users, but also your product and your brand and your company.
Interesting. So just to make sure I understand, right, you guys are creating workspaces within Slack that other customers can go and join with moderators from Pendo, so that this way they can learn from each other the community style?
Right. So we have our formal discussion forum, which is more of our moderated approach. It is attached to our knowledge base, so you can search answers, and it's like a repository of knowledge. But we also have our Slack workspace called Pendo Connect, and that's kind of like our 100% user-led forum, and it's very, very active. Folks are very engaged in there. They're answering each other's questions. We have Pendo people in there, but it's not really moderated because we kind of want it to be just user-led. So it's really taken off.
That's awesome. I know we were talking about email. Danny, you were shaking your head no. You're like, yeah, email's not the only way, pal. So what are your thoughts on that, piggybacking off of what Erica just mentioned?
Yeah, maybe a bit of a rhetorical question, but not sure how many emails we all read today, or how many unread emails are still in our box. So I think email seems like an easy way to do it, but you just really have to have a great email game if you're going to use that as a primary function for scaling. I've had a lot of success with virtual, events, webinars. We just launched something here at Twilio called Twilio Tuesdays, which is sort of a tips and trick just for our users. But we've done that at previous places I've worked at as well in different formats. And the idea is we source different topics that are really important to the users or that they really want to learn more about. And we do it in an interactive format where, a little bit of presentation, but the rest is all, open session, Q&A. So that's one way. I do agree with Erica. There's a place for in-app messaging and guides, and I used Pendo in my last role. It can be extremely effective for different kinds of communication, but you have to be careful with that just because there's so many things overwhelming and you don't also want to take away from what's going on in-app. So you really have to find a good balance of that. I'm a huge fan of community forums, and Pendo also has some great community forums. We're trying Slack channels here at Twilio and have found it to be effective. We're looking at other ways to amplify that. I think the other thing that I know everybody's probably tired of at this point, but different sorts of chat bots, I think, can be useful for scaling certain things. It's not the answer to everything, but I think for a lot of the level 1 information, like if you always have to wait for a person or you always have to wait for a response, having those self-service, whether they're virtual assistants or different kinds of AI chatbots, I think they also have their place as part of a more holistic set of solutions.
That's a good point.
Can I hop in for just 1 second?
Yeah.
Eric and Danny made, these are just awesome channels. And as you continue to add channels, think about the customer experience too. You start to have overlapping content and duplication. And so if you can start thinking early too about how to create a single search and pull together like the customer, LMS, support, community, in-app. So when they do one search, it will surface all of that great content, which will help you scale even further because you won't be duplicating and having multiple teams creating the same content for different channels. So I just wanted to throw that out as you're sort of planning early, thinking about that.
I love that. This definitely doesn't have to be an echo chamber at all. Yeah, so Chad, I didn't mean to cut you off there. What are your thoughts on it as well?
Well, I'll save like the AI discussion, and a little bit later on, because it definitely handles like Mary's scenario, and because I would just argue like, why should you have to search at all? Like, why can't your systems really just tell you the answer? But unifying your information is really, really helpful. I'd say that a couple tips. So one is that my last company, I was sending out a voice of customer survey, and I was kind of following the traditional approach to it. I created a video that like indicates why we need the feedback, and I sent a pre-email indicating that an email would be coming with a link to the survey, and it was branded, looked great. I got like very little responses, and then I used our in-app software that we have, and instantly just got tons of responses. And so I definitely think that in-app is a great thing, and I know Erica, you'd agree. I definitely recommend like experimenting. Part of it's like knowing your customers, right? Which customers are logging in? Who do you want to get information from? Who do you want to send information to? So you want to factor in all those different things like the persona, the target, and kind of what you want to provide to them. Another thing at my current company, which is really interesting, and I think Danny, you mentioned about Slack. So we use Slack as almost as a primary communication channel with our customers. They each have their own Slack channel, and majority of them are on Slack. Some of them are not, but what we do is our Slack conversations flow into our ticketing system. So it's a really kind of easy way for our support team to engage and for us to track all of that. And then we use another software to push out information. And so we have a kind of a two-way of communicating through Slack, and we find it to be really, really effective. And I can also track engagement. So it's just some different unique approaches to using technology and communicating different ways. I think the last thing is that text, like you should look to be on a text communication with your customers in terms of SMS and certain senior leaders, and this is a great way of breaking through the email chain.
I love that. One of my former managers used to tell me, it's like, hey, you're telling me you have all these champions at this account, but you don't have a real champion until they give you their phone number. So that definitely hits home with me. But in the vein of all this communication and wanting to not only deliver personalized but relevant communication to our customers, and then obviously I think at the very vein of this conversation, doing it at scale, in order for us to do this really well, our data needs to be really clean. And this is always an interesting conversation and a topic to talk about, because I think that there's a difference between having perfect data, if that even exists, and data that's good enough to activate. And so given the state that we're in, where data is royalty, I guess the question for the group is, like, how ready or what do you need to be data ready for a digital customer success strategy? Does it need to be fully fleshed out? Does it need to be in its beginning stages and start clean? Kind of where are we at in terms of data maturity that's required in order to actually run a digital CS strategy? With that, I know, Chad, you had some ideas on that as well leading up to the event, so I'll kick it over to you.
Yeah, I think that you're never data ready, so don't expect to be. Your data is always going to be messy. And myself just joining Ciena, we had a lot of just scrubbing to do, and so that was one of the first things, is just getting all your contract data, getting all that ready, making sure that how your systems are connected is another one. And I think that the other thing is that your data is never going to, as I mentioned, your data is never going to be ready. So you want to be scrappy. So I, figured out how to extract data from all of our customers, and then found out like how to link that with our accounts in our CRM. And so, right now we're just going to do some manual, uploads, and then we're working on a better and more kind of aggregate approach to this. But I think that, even my last company as well, like, we were trying to figure out how to get from data from one system to another. And I found out our product was using a particular analytics system, and just figured out, like, hey, I can leverage that data that I have, connect it into our CRM, and then leverage that for different ways of communicating to customers. So I think that, like, data's never going to be where it needs to be. Think about what are those at the minimum level that you can do, and then build a roadmap. So it's like, okay, I have this data, I can start to do this type of communication. And then here's what I need to do this type of communication. Here's the resources that I'll need. Maybe here's the systems that I'll need. And then just think about it from a holistic, like, roadmap approach, just like your product team would. And then that way you can work to get your data in a better place and provide that experience that you want at scale.
For sure. I think the theme here is, don't let perfect be the enemy of good, right? I think if we wait too long, we'll never get it off the ground. But still, I think to a certain degree, data is required in order to run automated campaigns and being able to scale, right? So, Erica, just to ask you, like, what's your take? Like,
Yeah.
How ready does data need to be, and what does that even mean realistically?
Yeah, I agree. If you get stuck in analysis paralysis, you'll never move past it. And sometimes you just need to take whatever you have access to, whether that's like qualitative or anecdotal, go talk to your customer success team, go talk to your account management team, go talk to your customers and start there. You don't have to actually have, the quantitative data if you don't have access to it. So start somewhere. If you're lucky to have access to this, like, really rich user data, like product usage, information from your CRM or other systems, it's going to be a much better and much more targeted approach. And one thing that I always like to call out when I talk about data and preparing for the long tail strategy, and maybe this is well known at this point, but it kind of blew my mind about a year ago, was shifting my team's focus to think about it from an account perspective and really think of it from a user-centric perspective. So what's the most common path to success or value for an individual user? And so the way that we kind of shifted our mindset around this was, whether someone's been a customer for 5 years or 5 minutes, there's always going to be these new people coming in and needing to understand and learn how to use the product. And they don't always get that handheld approach that people get in the beginning. So onboarding never ends. We started our complete digital strategy with what we had access to, which is first login. So we know exactly when someone's logging into the product. And even if that's all you have access to, you can craft an entire user journey for that individual. And you can't solve for all the nuances. So we start with the happy path and then we build around that.
I love that. I think a lot of times when we speak to other folks in CS, at least in my role here, right, I think there is a lot of analysis paralysis because they're looking for that quantitative information. They say things like, oh, I don't have it in this database, or I don't have it in that database. And one of the things that you just mentioned that I love It's like, hey, you don't necessarily need quantitative data in your database. Go out and talk to the customer. Go talk to the person who closed the deal to begin with and get contextual information from them, so that this way you could craft something that's even just an MVP. It's better than nothing. So I absolutely love that as well. I know we got a couple more questions coming up, but you also talked about different ways to go about doing this. And so now I kind of want to bring in the elephant in the room, the thing that we all have been talking about for many years now, which is artificial intelligence, right? So in a world where data is lacking, AI can sometimes come in and help this. And there's 1,000,001 different use cases for artificial intelligence. And I'd love to ask the room, how are you guys leveraging AI? What do you see working? What do you see not working? And share with the group. So Denny, I'll kick it over to you, and then Chad, I know you dropped a breadcrumb a little bit earlier about some stuff that you want to talk about with AI. So we'll circle back there. But Danny, kicking over to you first with AI. How do you think about AI in this go-to-market motion? Data ready or not?
I'm pretty tech forward. So, from the moment AI came out, I wanted to use it to help us in customer success and basically to solve a lot of my own problems. I think, maybe starting with what you shouldn't trust AI to do. I think it's really easy to hand it over everything and just say, oh, answer all my customer questions, reply to all my emails. If you're doing that without, a lot of editing and a lot of oversight, you're going to upset a lot of people by doing that. And I think, hallucination is still a thing, regardless of how great these AI models get. And so I think it does still require a very strong human element to audit the outputs, to make sure it's being used appropriately. And also, if you're dealing with PII or other things like that, you have to really keep that in focus. When I was still at Jungle Scout, I started developing some app that I use now today at Twilio too, called Transcribe IQ. And a lot of that is based on taking all of the complex information that's in our calls. We use Gong, but it really doesn't matter which you use. And my team was having 30 plus calls a day. There was no way I could figure out what was going on in all of those, or extract what we need to do next or where we should be worried. And so this automatically will use AI to analyze those calls and then ship them into Slack, into the appropriate channels for the different teams, for leadership, even for call coaching and other things like that. So I think that's one really good use of it, is if you can standardize it. And once you've got a really solid set of prompts that you can use to get consistent outputs, it can really unlock a lot of the intelligence that are in your calls. And that most of us are sitting on a gold mine of that today and just don't have the time or resources to go and comb through it and figure out, what are the things that the customers are saying across all these calls that are the most valuable? Or why are we losing all of these customers? Or, why are these customers growing? There's just like a lot of good meta themes. And I think those are things that artificial intelligence is naturally better than humans at doing, or can just do it in such a reduced amount of time. But I do see the models are getting increasingly complex. And I think that comes with its own challenges where, some people might be overly reliant on using them to do things that they're not quite ready to do yet. And I mean, I got something the other day that said insert customer name here, in one of my emails that was clearly written by AI. And so I think people are getting maybe a bit too lax with it. And I think for, people who want to use it for scale, you really have to have more oversight than you would imagine to get this started. And then you can start working it in more and more as you flesh that out.
Sure. I love that. I love the focus on bringing data in using AI, so that this way we can craft those strategies. Mary, I didn't mean to cut you off there.
No, you could tell I'm all excited after what Danny was saying, that, and it piggybacks to the conversation we were having about inaccurate data just a little bit ago. One of the things that can really skew the AI, right, is if you have bad or inaccurate data. So having a governance model around data management, some policies and processes in place to make sure that people are responsible for looking at the cleanliness and accuracy of the data, and then analyzing what is coming out of the AI as well. To Danny's point, what is the business context, of what's coming out using the AI, and just sort of leveraging that governance structure to make sure that the AI is being optimized.
For sure. Chad, I know you left us a breadcrumb here. I'm itching to hear what your hot take is here on AI. So not to put you on the spot here, but let's hear it.
I mean, I've been leveraging AI technologies for now, for many years. And I think that it's definitely, things have changed, and I don't know how, if people have realized how they've changed. So, even referring to as a chatbot, it's no longer, I'd say, just a chatbot. I mean, some of these technologies are, but for example, at Sienna, this is like what we do, and we refer to it as an agent, and the agent's just like almost like any employee. I mean, we call her Sienna, like we have a name for her, it's just like any employee that's coming on. You train your employee. And what's really interesting is that it's gone to the point where, before you're creating these flows and you're like trying to direct them to answer the questions, these types of questions in a certain way. And where AI is going and where it's gotten to even today is kind of like what you were saying, Mary. It's like pulling all your data sources together and creating like a general rules and guidelines on how you want this agent to respond to your customers. And obviously, like, there has to be guardrails in place, but almost letting them go a little bit to be that first line of defense. I think it's different from a e-commerce, like B2C versus B2B. I think B2B is like more technical, but even just gathering the information from a customer, one of the most frustrating things as a customer is like you interact with support and then you wait for another 3 hours and they ask you a question. Oh, can you send me a screenshot? And imagine like you have something that can work at any time of the day. It can be programmed so that it's actually reflecting your brand. And it's like, using emoticons or not using emoticons, and all these different things, and gathering the information that you need to better serve that customer and to get their issues resolved faster, sometimes answering their questions right then and there. And in fact, with our own product, we had to put a delay because it was answering all these questions like all at once for like multiple customers at once, so fast that they knew it was a bot. And so once we put a delay into the product as a feature, then it's like, oh, okay, this is actually a human helping me. That's the perception. So I really think that the idea of where AI is today with, OpenAI and these other things, like you were saying, Danny, with the models are getting so much better. You don't necessarily have to train like pre-trained data and have all this data. These models will do it for you. And then you're obviously just like a regular employee, you're giving them the more information. And I think the other thing is that, with our support teams, sometimes like we're having bad days, or sometimes, we got a customer that's really angry, or sometimes we answer things inconsistently, but AI won't. Like in certain circumstances, they're going to handle that situation in a certain way. A customer's asking maybe to cancel a contract, and you can train your AI to make it difficult to do that. So lots of different things. I think it's advancing very quickly, and I think that it's something definitely that will help with scale and something to continue to test.
That's awesome. It's also really interesting about the delay. Fun Snapplecat moment here. I learned this recently. When ATMs first came out, ATMs were giving money out to customers too quickly. And so people didn't believe that they were giving the right amount when they would request it. So they've actually implemented a delay for when money would come out of the machine. That immediately reminded me of what you just said about AI. Now, one of the things that I think is like a huge topic here when it comes to any client-facing role with AI is like two things. One, is it going to get so good that I'll become obsolete? And two, when are we going to get to a point where like the human element of AI is going to match my human element? And so I think there continues to be a pretty strong debate about the humanness of artificial intelligence, and if whether or not artificial intelligence is ever going to be able to match or supersede the true human element that we can all deliver to our customers. And so I guess as AI develops, how do you guys make sure that you're not losing the human element in your interactions with customers and even with your colleagues cross-departmentally if you continue to adopt AI? I know, Mary, you have a pretty strong stance on this one. So I want to hand it over to you to kind of start us off with that answer.
Yeah, thank you. So I think, it's been said for years, and I still think it's very, very true. And people probably roll their eyes when you go journey mapping. But the reality is, not having a journey map is sitting down and saying, what should the ideal customer experience look like? What do we want them to feel? What do we want them to have for an outcome is really important. So what are those touch points? What are those deliverables? What are the, things that have to be done to help them be successful? And then it's ultimately looking at that and saying, what can we automate effectively that isn't going to impact the relationship and that experience that we want them to have? And then layering in the human touch into the pieces that are the most valuable, and strategic. For example, you can automate the emails and automate the technical tasks and the integrations and the reporting. but who's going to have a really effective value review with your customer? That is going to be where like your CSMs and account managers are going to have the greatest touch. So if you just take that away and start to do digital QBRs, and here's your AI generated report, for your customers, yeah, you can give them a weekly AI generated value report on adoption, and Pendo data would be awesome to build into that. But at the end of the day, right, it becomes a tactical relationship, and you become a vendor instead of a partner to your customers.
For sure. And Danny, or should I say customer name, you obviously have experienced this firsthand with other vendors. I mean, what are you all doing with this AI front to separate yourself, where you're able to get the scalability aspects of AI, but at the same time, to Mary's point, making sure that you're not just doing cheap touch points with your customer to make sure that you're actually delivering value? How are you guys approaching that?
I think it's all about personalization. I think even in email, one of the channels that we talked about earlier, I've seen humans send very, very brief responses, almost to where it's just like they're chatting with me instead of responding via email. And so I think we have lost a little bit of the personalization of writing an actual email, putting some thought into it, maybe, addressing the customer by name and things that about them or things that are important to them. I think like over time, you can build that into AI effectively to where it starts to create a better profile. I mean, ChatGPT is doing that right now and storing all of your personal information so that it can remember things in the future. But I think the other way to do this is like blend the AI with the human escalation paths. So, even if you're using an AI chatbot for your support, there's got to be some point where it's not equipped to handle it anymore. And that goes into, okay, now I'm giving you over to the L2, here's this person's name, and it is an actual human. So I think when things start to get complex, when things start to get sensitive or personal, I think that's when you do want to sort of intermingle the human and AI component of that. I think what AI lacks, even in the best AI, is empathy and authenticity. And you can smell it a mile away. It's become, and I think the more and more you use AI, the easier it is to spot in the wild, whether it's written content. I mean, half the blogs I read now are just some AI generated content that you see on 3 other blogs, just slightly different. And so I think you really need to bring that human empathy, that human authenticity that AI can't yet quite reproduce. And I think it takes training on that too for your teams. Like you have to talk about like, how do you be empathetic to customers? How do you do active listening? It's not always just about the data. I think you want to create a relationship. And, for as much as we talk about scale and automation and everything, like for the few touch points you are going to have with this customer, like it has to be extra impactful and extra meaningful. And you really have to make a good impression that you're there for them. And so I wouldn't underscore that. And you really have to kind of blend that with all of the other automation tools and in-app stuff that you're doing, because if not, the customer just feels like a number. And I'm sure like comes into their thoughts when they think about renewing or continuing to pay for the service.
I couldn't agree more. And I was out in California not so long ago, and I was talking to a CTO, and they were explaining to me their take on artificial intelligence. And they're like, I believe in the future, the power of in-person meetings is going to come back full circle, because that's the one thing that you really aren't going to be able to replicate or reproduce. It's this human authenticity of the conversation. And Erica, I think you kind of touched upon that, not necessarily being in person per se, but you were talking about with the data piece, really delving into onboarding and understanding not just what the account needs, which I feel like AI would do a really great job of reading like a 5K and talking about key objectives of like a Fortune 1000 or Fortune 500. But to your point, you're like, no, what does the controller need? Or what does this analyst need? And so I guess in the vein of AI and trying to stick with authenticity while still bringing in valuable insights that you might be able to get from Pendo or other tools, what's your take on how to leverage AI in this model and without losing the human element to the relationship?
Yeah, and I really love what Danny said earlier about just remembering that humans aren't perfect either. And so just like with people, you really have to be thoughtful with your approach, whether that is your one-to-one approach or your one-to-many or scaled. So no, you cannot solve for all use cases with a scaled or one-to-many approach. I mentioned you got to try to solve for the 80%. That's our mantra. If we kind of start to veer into we're overcomplicating things, or but what about this? What about that? What about this use case? We just try to solve for that 80%. And scaled or one-to-many doesn't mean no humans. I think that's the other misconception is we're not trying to replace humans. And I don't think AI is necessarily, in some cases, trying to replace humans. I think it's supposed to help make humans more effective and more efficient, and covering for that other 20% that a digital approach just isn't going to solve for. So taking some of those rote administrative tasks that can be done at scale, or using AI, it's definitely something we should be excited about and not fearful of, and lean into, because it's not going away. So for us, what that looks like in practice is we try to mimic what a human would do. And when, like Mary said earlier about, take a look at your digital or your customer journey, and we say, all right, what can we automate? What can we digitize? And what channel do we do that with? So, I was mentioning earlier in the chat, our open rates are pretty high for email, actually, because we think it's because we craft content to be very approachable and to be human. And the people who are writing the content are not in marketing. It doesn't have marketing speak. We're not trying to sell you anything. It's people who used to be customer success managers. So they know what content is going to resonate and what tone is going to resonate with our users. So when you get 30 to 50% open rates, that's when you're really sending, messages that are really resonating and feel very relevant to the users.
I love that. I absolutely love that. And I appreciate you sharing that. I know we got a couple minutes left, and I haven't had a chance to look at the chat for an open Q&A, but with the last few minutes left, I'd love to be able to answer some questions that have come out on the chat, so that this way we can get some of the top ones shared. Sully, if you're behind the scenes here as the MC, if you've marked down or bookmarked any that we can answer, now would be the time to share them with us, so this way we could answer some.
So we've got a couple questions here from the chat that didn't get answered. First one from Jeanette. How do you safeguard that the bot always gives a correct and usable answer?
It's $1 million question. I have a take on that, but I'm going to give it to the panelists here.
Yeah, I mean, I think of it as like, your employee or your child, but it doesn't really necessarily work with your child, is that you set boundaries and you provide instructions, and the chatbot or the agent's going to be more or less following those instructions. You can really set those boundaries, unlike your children or your employees at times. So yeah, I mean, it's just a matter, and then you test it out, and you can do internal testing. You can see how it would respond in certain situations, and then you can course correct it. But again, like, this is very different, and the ways that these agents and AI products are working are very different from even like 6 months ago. So it's really something that people have to start to jump into. And the last thing I'll say is, like, we talked about journey, which is extremely important. The last thing is just think about segmentation, right? So not all of your clients maybe need to go through certain experiences, and thinking through that journey, and maybe adding that human element more into certain segments. So just something that's really, really important to you. You have to think about your business, go back to, like, how certain customers have higher growth opportunities, depending on how much they're paying you, and all these different things. So, again, like, do not turn on everything for automatic and scale, and just think about it in terms of what your business goals are and how you need to achieve them.
We got 1 more minute left. Does anybody have any final words on that one topic before we close out the session today?
I have just one thought that goes back to what everyone has said on this call, which is, when you're going to scale and you're rolling something out for your customers, you assume it's going to add value. Make sure you're messaging to the customers about what's in it for them, right? And make sure that what you're rolling out is actually bringing value. If you do that, you're going to knock it out of the park with these great scaled programs.
For sure. And Danny, I saw you speaking as well. I couldn't hear you. Want to try one more time real quick just to wrap us up?
It's like I can't
the
hear you
audio's
this
out.
time. Anyways, we're at time here, so just want to say thank you to all our speakers. Any questions that we weren't able to get to, we'll be passing along to our speakers and sharing and will sharing their answers along with the recording of the session in our resource hub. All Summit attendees will be notified when the recordings are live. Thank you for our wonderful speakers for joining us today, and thank you for everyone else for attending. And hope you guys have a wonderful rest of the day and hopefully join some more sessions.
Thank
Bye, all.
you.